Hello everyone, the excuse endures! Welcome to episode 3 of the Just an Excuse podcast, where the name is the game and the game is D&D and it's all the characters in between. I'm your host and the one with the perpetual need for an excuse, and more or less just an excuse to indulge my ever-present insanity. My name is Miguel Bloomberg and I'm happy to have you back. With me today, this evening, this morning, or I guess it doesn't really matter when we're doing it, matters when you're listening to it. That would be my good friend. I say that a lot. I feel like I very often have people on here, and this is the third episode, so I gotta say it a couple times, is my good friend. He has been a DM for me, but I've also had the absolute pleasure of being across the proverbial table from him in a couple different campaigns. He's an incredible DM, an excellent player, and I have enjoyed every moment I spent with him in terms of Dungeons & Dragons, and I'm more than happy that he's taken a risk with me here to expose his own insanity when it comes to this game, live for the pleasure of you. That would be my good friend TJ. How you doing, TJ?
Oh man, incredible to be here. You know, what I'm hearing is that this is really a secret game show to figure out which of your good friends are willing to become your best friends, and that's the only reason we're actually here.
You know what they call, this is a very poorly disguised trust fall exercise. How much are you willing to give me that I can then put on the internet?
I'm ready to go all the way, baby.
Okay, so like I said, this is about characters and character creation and all the stuff in the middle, you know. As I always say, we sit at these tables and we play with these characters and we put so much effort and time and energy into the stories that really goes into them. But for a lot of it, you know, as much as roleplay can bring a lot of that out, there's always those narratives that don't quite reach the dice and don't quite reach the character sheets, and they don't quite wind up really manifesting on a moment-to-moment roleplay basis. And this podcast is just an excuse for two people to sit down and really talk about some of the things that excites them about the character and maybe something that they'd like to pursue in a campaign going forward. So that's what we're going to do. And today I have the absolute pleasure of discussing a character TJ has been playing and that I've had the pleasure to play with in a campaign of ours, and that would be the lovely, the elegant, the always poised Vidala. A long time ago, a trawler sat atop a windswept dune, gazing out at the grand caravan that had been her home. After today, it would be no longer. She knew it would hurt. It already did. But she wanted to watch it one more time. Wanted to feel that harsh sun catch that last whiff of sweat and family. She knew it would hurt. But she wanted to feel that too. To be a trawler is to know the deserts of Teva, to have prayed for mercy from the sun during the day and regretted those prayers at frigid night. Life did not begin in the floating cities. It began long ago, hiding in the fissures and ruins. That life still exists today, through foraging for the little food to eat and scavenging through the ruins of past civilizations to sell. It is a burdensome life, and a trawler bears it with pride. The wind and the sun does not crush them, nor does it crush their spirit. Their regattas are always a parade of color and noise, even on the coldest nights. Stories say that they can even be heard from the Twin Cities. But on days like these, a trawler could be heard from the Pale, for it was the time of the Grand Regatta. A twinlock nuzzled the trawler's arm, prompting her to stand and turn away. Perhaps she had watched all she could. The twinlock was laden with all she would ever need. She checked the straps again, weighing her choices. To trade thousands, or today tens of thousands of brothers and sisters, was a somber gambit. Tomorrow she would only have one. And as she rubbed a firm hand over its long head and between its pointed ears, She was grateful for the company. The Grand Regatta only ever gathered during the reunion of life, during the time when the life above reunited with the life below. It was a celebration of life, the celebration of a life she now forfeit. For a trawler to leave a regatta was to admit defeat, to believe oneself is too good for what the desert provides. She did not feel these things, but it wouldn't matter. She could return, but it would not be the same. It would never be. Satisfied with her work, the trawler moved to mount. Then she finally felt it. Felt the vibrations of thousands of feet moving through the earth. The display every bit as awe-inspiring as the first time she had. She turned back to watch the Grand Regatta begin to snake its way through the barren valley. It took less than an hour for all of them to disappear into the setting sun. She waited until they had. Whew, okay, so
Wow, those explosions, that was impressive work.
I didn't know Vidala had dynamite. But,
yeah,
TJ called me specifically after, in the middle of listening to that, because we listened to it live, and he said, if you do not put explosions in it right now, I think I will kill everyone here.
Yeah, it's essential to the character backstory.
Oh, yeah, as it should be for every character, I say. But anyway, in all seriousness, let's get to the nitty-gritty, shall we? So, we'll start off nice and easy. TJ, talk to me about what inspired Vidala. I've said this a couple times, so at the risk of sounding like a broken record, character inspiration, at least for me personally, can come from a lot of different things. It comes from, obviously, just the random idea popping into your head. It can come from a song. I've inspired a lot of characters, me personally, have been inspired from songs, or it can just be some smattering of different tropes that you thought came together in an interesting way, or even a video game. What would you say was the direct inspiration for Vidala? What made you want to play this character?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, right? I don't know if you're like me, but I have a Google Doc that is just full of character ideas and random character names that I think are cool.
The character compendium, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I always think, oh, great, I get to play in a campaign. I'm going to pick a person from that list, and I'm going to play them. But I usually never end up actually playing someone from that list. Because when I come to these games, I usually ask the DM a question of, what do they want, like what story do they want to tell, or who is a character they wish they had in their game? Because I, as a DM, sometimes ask that question to myself, right? What is the kind of player character I really wish I had in this world to tell a certain story? And a lot of times I start there, and then I think my inspirations grow from that point, right? So you
use like the stories of the DM setting to kind of work as seeds to grow into a character.
Exactly.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you looked at the map of J.R. Tolkien, right? And you looked and you saw that there's a dragon that he drew on the map right around this big single mountain, and I go, what? I want to play a character that comes from there. There's a freaking dragon over there, right? And then you end up playing like Durin, right? That's how I like to approach it because it gets me excited. So for me, it began by asking Jared, who you've already had on the show, about his world. And there was a place on the map that I asked about, and he told me about this vast desert that has these sky cities that float around that desert. And my follow-up question was, well, that's really cool. You've got this incredible Majocracy sky city. Who's living in those deserts, right?
Is that how you're supposed to say it? Majocracy?
Majocracy?
I've always said Majocracy.
That probably is right.
We're doing made up words here. We don't know how we're saying them
Exactly.
anyway.
Yeah,
Sorry to
you can say
interrupt, but I was
whatever
just like, I've never heard it said that.
No,
way.
you're totally right. So yeah, that's where it began, was trying to find out more about the world, right? And I like to always sort of pick one of the far corners on the map as well. And learning that there wasn't a lot of defined existing lore in this location, it provided a little microcosm of a place where I could sort of world build alongside the DM. And to me, that's super exciting as a DM who's playing as a character, right? We're always thinking creatively.
Yeah.
So the two of us got to work together to make a little, sort of like a setting, a region, and it grew from there. I also, for my characters, get a lot of like a visual vibe first. And lastly, something that was for me was I knew what class I wanted to play, which was a Beast Heart, which is a third-party MCDM class that entirely evolves around having a beast companion with your character. It's like a dedicated Beast Heart Ranger. And so I knew I wanted those things. I wanted to play a character from this little part of Jared's world, and it turned into this wandering, vagrant merchant lady who rides around on a giant capybara laden with goods to trade, who is suspicious of gods and will snipe a motherfucker. Oh, is this a family-friendly podcast?
Who gives a fuck? Mom, sorry.
Uh-oh.
It's fine. We've been cursing in the last 2 episodes. I'm sure a couple more won't hurt too much. So that's a really interesting approach. I guess as someone who's only DM'd once or twice, and I'll be honest, they weren't a very good idea. To any aspiring DMs out there, do not do a homebrew as your first attempt at it. Please, for the love of God, use a pre-made. But yeah, ever since that, I felt, and I don't know if you would connect with this, but I felt I can never quite extract myself from DM brain. I'm constantly kind of seeing, even as a player, like the angles of like, okay, what is the DM trying to do here? What are they trying to push me towards? And that creates a really interesting way of seeing the game that I feel like you never really understand if you never DM'd at least once. You know what I mean? I feel like that changes the way I play the game personally.
Oh, 100%, right? I mean, once you know how to bake a cake, you want to bake more cakes, right? And yeah, once you know how it all works, you just can't stop thinking creatively, right? And you know the same thoughts in some fashion of what's going through your DM's head if you've already been a DM. And I think that collaborative storytelling aspect is one of the greatest gifts that D&D can offer us, right? Is to work with someone to tell a story.
Right, yeah. So you said you sat down with Jared to kind of, you basically, you threw a dart at a board. Obviously, I'm being flippant here. You threw a dart at the board, you landed in this place, and he gave you, I imagine, a rough spiel of what that area was. But then you said that you came together with him and you kind of expanded the lore bit by bit for the sake of this character. Obviously, we know a little bit about the place that you come from, kind of through osmosis between you and another character and that dynamic that's played out so far in the campaign. I'm curious, if it's a banana question, which is our spoiler word, then go ahead and cut off where you think is necessary. How much of that current lore that we've kind of been tiptoeing around thus far would you say was like the original vision, and how much of it was like both you and Jared coming together of like, oh, this is a great idea and this is a great idea? Like, I'm curious what that mix is.
Well, basically, I think the way it started for me was Jared gave me a sandbox to play in, right? And
as all good DMs do, they put the child in the box, exactly. And they say, have fun.
And I was able to sort of basically write a gazetteer of basically the lifestyle of a person in that setting. And that lifestyle, that profession is what Vidala became. And that profession is to be a trawler, someone who combs the sand looking for goods, for any morsels of food, right? And the culture that arises amongst these trawlers. And then I sort of figured, okay, if we're already going for a nautical trawler theme, what happens when you get multiple trawlers together? Well, then you have a regatta, right? Okay, you have a race going on. And these sort of ideas snowball off of each other.
I have to ask what a regatta is, because I'm truly...
A regatta? Oh, my goodness. A regatta, if you know the sport of crew. So line up a bunch of people in a tiny, tiny canoe, a really long, tiny canoe. Give them all oars, and they're racing in these skinny boats. A regatta is when you bring all these boats together and race them all at the same time.
So rowing?
It's rowing, yes.
Okay. Using the cool words to describe that sport. Okay.
You know.
Okay.
Yes.
I've derailed
the
you.
original question.
I'm so sorry.
I got it totally off track. No, you're okay.
This is my ignorance biting me in the ass again. I'll just to try and reignite where we were at. We were talking about how much of the world was like that we currently know in that area was the combination of you working together and Jared working together, and how did that come to be?
So to kind of get back on track, right? I wrote this sort of gazetteer of the region and the lifestyle of a person there. And then through my character, I'm able to express these things. And to me, right, there's no part of a person's background that they usually feel like they have to hide, right? If I'm talking to someone that I meet at work, right, and they happen to have come from Russia, for example, usually those people are happy to talk about, like, what their background. Mm-hmm. So having a character that is more than happy to talk about their stuff, but they don't want to bore everyone and just lore dump to a party.
Right.
So hinting at things, right? Oh, yeah, you know, this is sort of my lifestyle. And if the party wants to ask more questions, that depth is there and it's waiting to be asked.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'd say that's definitely Vidala. Like, she's not afraid to spin the yarn, just through my own interactions and just listening to her. But you definitely are playing her the way you're describing her, in the sense that it's like she's not holding back. She's just like, it's not I didn't lie, you never asked. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways too, player characters they're at their best when they can sort of provide more of that verisimilitude to everyone else at the table, right? So you believe the world is more real when the characters at the table are talking about their own ties to the world, to places that, to be fair, you'll probably never get to visit in the game, right? DMs make these great big worlds, and you'll usually visit a province or two
if
sometimes,
you're lucky,
right?
A quarter of it.
Right. So I think it's so important to me. I think back on a video game, the Dark Souls games, right? To me, the NPCs are one of my favorite parts of those games, because you get to create these images of these far-off lands and knights that travel, and the world that you're playing in is suddenly no longer just the game world that you're in, but it's much, much larger. I think that's just so much more fun for me as a player, at least.
No, yeah, I think that's definitely a really interesting approach to, like, a character-making philosophy. I suppose. By the way, I had to Google what verisimilitude means, by the way, while you were talking.
I'm using fancy words.
You are using fancy words. You're kicking my ass here.
I apologize.
I consider myself a fancy word connoisseur, not compared to this guy.
Jank way of describing verisimilitude is effectively your ability to believe your own make-believe, right? If the game induces a sense of verisimilitude to you, you feel present and involved in the game, and that you are actually your character and you're actually in this world, and the consequences are real.
So immersion in a layman's term.
Yes, exactly, immersion.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I'm gonna start using that word. I'm gonna put that one of my fun words.
You'll sound so smart.
Yep, true. So I wonder. Well, first I want to say I think the philosophy is really interesting, and I kind of want to counter it, because in my own experience, I have had obviously everyone creates characters differently, and I really appreciate hearing yours, because I have a much different approach to making a character. I'm very much I have a character compendium, and when I get the chance to be asked, I will I will take that character and present it. Like for this campaign, I came to Jared with I think 2 or 3 ideas, and we had maybe like a 45-minute to an hour long conversation, a private call, which we just kind of discussed about like the rough idea and vibe of the character and what the maybe the general arc paths would look like for each one of them. But they were very much like, here's my idea, and then your idea is all the way over here, and we're going to connect them somewhere. Rather than the path you took, which was like, I'm going to plant a seed somewhere in your idea, and we're going to grow it and foster it from there.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting idea, because I have personally, I like verisimilitude a lot. I remember in the other campaign I'm in, the one where I play Audio, in Fenn's campaign, I remember one of the things I always liked to do, or one of the things that I did when I was making my character for Fenn's campaign that I then took as a thing I now do in all campaigns I play, is I want to, rather to make my character and me personally feel immersed and feel like my character's actually there. I want a character to have ties to the world, right? I don't just want them skimming along the world's surface. I want them to be tied down in some way. If that manifests in like they have a family somewhere else, or they understand a culture somewhere else, those are all awesome. So I find myself very often writing backstories to characters, and then I go, hey, can I just know where on the map her hometown is, and where would her brothers have been sent in this setting, right? Because the original backstory for Audio didn't have any of those things. It was just brothers got sent away, she lived in a city, and now she's here, right? So it was, I always found myself like pursuing verisimilitude, even though I didn't know what that word was at the time, in my own way. And I think the way you're doing it is really cool, because rather than having to jerry-rig a character into place with a world, not saying that it's bad, I think my characters have worked out very well, but rather than having to jerry-rig it, you are able to foster that connection naturally just in the creation of the character, rather than walking up with a fully fledged idea, is a really, really compelling way to make a character. I think it's a really interesting way to do it. It's not one I've considered.
I mean, yeah, it can be rewarding, but you are sort of starting from scratch, right? At the same time, though, that doesn't mean that you can't come up with a character sort of arc concept, right? A lot of us have these ideas of, well, I want to make this archetype of a character to engage with. So, for instance, right, you are the, with Uniwan, sort of the fresh eyes on the world, right? The new kid who doesn't know how the world works and doesn't know how they should act in this world, right? And that can be really compelling. Some people choose revenge arcs as sort of a core thread, and you can brainstorm those and then kind of thread them into these characters that you make. Yeah, I don't think there's like a limit in any way to the number of places you can draw inspiration from. But as you were talking, it had me sort of thinking that something that is core to me, and you might agree with this a bit with your theater background, is leaving blank space in your characters for improvisation.
Yep.
I've seen you do it with your characters in my games. It's impressive every time that you do, but it's one of my favorite things as well, right? So this character, Vidala, she's a 98-year-old half-elf, which means she's been around. But she's also a level 4? Are we 5 now? Decently low-level adventurer, which means she hasn't gotten up to too much in her life, but she's done stuff. So that allows me to go, oh, yeah, she had a gig as a cobbler for a while, and a chef, and maybe she was a scout, and that allows you, in moments where there's character drama, to maybe create something in that moment to add to the drama, right? Or to support another character. I think that's really crucial.
No, I honestly, you nailed a thing that I have come to believe about Dungeons and Dragons, like eloquently, like I'm not kidding. You nailed it right on the head. Like, if I were to ever make a video, or if I was ever to give someone, like, top 10 tips for playing Dungeons and Dragons for the first time, right? Especially when it comes to character creation, one of the biggest things I would say is, like, if I had to put it in a single sentence, is embrace the comedy, right?
Yeah.
Like, the example I've often used in my head in my theoretical lessons to the D&D protege I'm never going to have is, everyone, when they make that first character, makes that, at least for me, makes that, like, uber competent assassin, the guy who can break into anywhere and never get caught. It's never been caught.
Chaddington.
Never been caught at a mission and could kill people with the twitch of his thumb and his forefinger, and he's feared by the city and the capital. And that's great. Those are fun characters to play. I don't knock it at all. Like, I play those characters too. The problem is, as you can write this eloquent backstory to this character and be the coolest character to ever breathe air, but inevitably you're going to sit down at that table and you're going to be trying to do something, and the DM's going to ask you to roll, and you're going to roll a 1. And that means your character has to fail. And I've seen people bounce off of the game because they're entreated to this idea of playing a character and playing this cool idea of characters, and they hear all these stories about characters doing cool things, so they make a cool character, one that they'd want to play, and then when they go to play that character, and then it's like they build the strongest man in the bar, and then he nat ones to pick up something heavy, and he can't pick it up anymore, and they're like, well, and there's that kind of the dissonance between those two ideals of, like, the vision of the character versus the actual execution of the character. And I've watched people bounce off the game very, very hard because they can't reconcile that, because they didn't leave, like you said, they didn't leave space. They didn't leave space to be like, yes, even if we are this uber competent assassin, we're still low level, and we're still going to fail. There has to be a reason for failure to exist without being immersion breaking, and leaving space or embracing the comedy, however you want to say it, really, really important to not only having a fun character, I would say, because having a character that can't accept failure, in my opinion, is wholly uninteresting, because you're going to fail inevitably, and it's better to play with it than ignore it. But I also think it's just more fun. It sets you up to have a better time at a table, in my opinion.
Man, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you and I could have a whole nother episode just talking about the relationship of the coolness of creating an interesting character's backstory, but how that gets filtered through the system that is Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, and the reality that you have lower proficiency scores at level 2, even if you are some young princeling who's been trained in the ways of the court and knows how to wield a blade better than anyone else, right? And I think the reality is, it's just, we're playing a game that has mechanics as opposed to
make-believe.
A book, right? We're not writing a book. I also, it had me thinking about something that I think about a lot with my characters too, and bringing it back to Vidala, is I want their coolest moments to be in the game, not something that's happened in the past in their backstory. Because I've seen that happen with a lot of people too, with these incredible backstories that make them this incredible person, and then they're killing some goblins, right? And it feels very out of place.
It's like such a downgrade.
Right. So for Vidala, I intentionally wanted a fairly dull backstory as far as dramatics. That's not to say that there isn't drama in her backstory that the party has yet to banana get to, with her family and her homelands, right?
Yeah, I think to just interject just a tiny bit, I think the arc that will eventually come between you and Abby's character coming home, and the kind of, I'm gonna say race war. I know that's not the right term here, but like the I think class war is a better word.
Yeah,
that has kind of been like slowly seeded, is really, really interesting to come up. But I look forward to that very much. Anyway,
well, that you say that, to give more context to people who are listening, Abby is a player character who has a character in the game, who is from one of those floating cities above the deserts. Part of the reason I picked that location too was that Jared had hinted to me that there is someone already from there, but they're from those cities. And I was thinking to myself, okay, immediately a natural place for drama is the relationship from the haves and the have-nots, right?
Yeah.
Who lives above and who lives below. So, yeah, I agree, right? There is drama to be had there. And I'm excited to see it. For sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, very convenient tie-in then to one of the next questions is we've talked a lot about like leaving space and having a lot of ideas about planning. So I'm curious, for Vidala, I know we talked about you seeded the character very early on with Jared, you helped expand the world, and you naturally picked a easily dramaed thing to do, right, between the two cities. Did you have did doing all of that give you an idea for like an arc for this character? Like, do you, like, for me, when I build characters, I like to build them with at a base level. I want them to have a problem, and then I want them to have an arc to fix the problem, and they can get new problems and new solutions along the way, but I want them to be at least a baseline of like, here is their issue, they need to solve it, and the solution of it is, and the whole point of the game is the friends we made along the way, the travel rather than destination. Did you have, or did you eventually come up with an arc for this character? Like, did you have an arc in mind? Did you have like at least like goals of like it'll be a found family story, or it'll be like this story? Where were you landing on that? Like at the base level, do you have an arc for this character?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great question, right? And I want to commend you on having a problem in your character being something core to making that character. I think that's something that requires time spent with characters and creative processes, right? And I think it makes characters far more interesting. It's something I always try to encourage people that I play with is like, yeah, think about something that's in their self they can change. I think it's a storytelling element. But for Vidala, this was a character who was brought in, intended as a guest character, to be there only for maybe 3 to 4 sessions. And the conversation I had with Jared was actually, I want to bring in a character, I want them to offload some information for these players, right? So in your instance, I provided you more context and leads in other countries about the other problems that are happening there that are similar to what's happening in your current country. And to maybe offload some neat and interesting and useful items and be on her way, right? At the end of the day, she is a merchant. That is her profession. She's not a professional adventurer. She's a merchant.
Okay.
That was the intention. And so I hadn't built too much into overall plot and overall character development. That was a conversation I had to have with Jared later on when I realized, I've been here for 5 sessions, and at the moment, she's got a pretty good reason and character to stick around. So let's think about that, right? So to answer your question, yes, but it's something that has developed over time, and I think not everyone has to go in knowing exactly what their character arc is going to be, and sometimes that's a found character arc too. Sort of talking about found character arcs, I think one of those, for Vidala at least, is this matronly role that she's starting to develop with party members. That she is this source of wisdom and comfort was not something I was initially expecting her to provide. Now, she's a 98-year-old, almost kind of borderlining on grandma, so I should have expected something like that to happen. But I think that's interesting, because in her backstory, she explicitly has denied matronly roles in the past and has abandoned them. Yes.
Okay, getting into a little juice here.
Yeah,
huh?
We'll get a little juicy, right? I had intended this character as someone who began their adventuring life to follow after the path of their father, who had left home, leaving her mother behind, and she left behind those duties and responsibilities that would normally culturally be expected of her. Yet she has sort of stumbled her way into these things as a character that I hadn't even foreseen, yet here she is, right? And that maybe is a later piece of conflict that she'll have to deal with, right? If she's been away on the road for all these years, not having returned back to her home, and abandoned these motherly ways, well, if her mother's an elf, her mom's still alive, and that means she hasn't seen her mom for 75 years? So, I think those are interesting stories that happen, right? That sometimes we don't expect them to start to occur.
Yeah.
And how is she going to approach it? Is she going to throw up her hands and leave the party, right? That's still something that could happen. Does she not want those responsibilities?
Yeah. And can I just say, like, beyond the fact that it's really interesting that the matron role came about naturally, despite, and the fact that it's such a beautiful contradiction without even knowing it, of like, oh, this was a character that abandoned matronly roles but has just so naturally slipped in it. Like, this is one of the things that we don't naturally get to see in like a D&D table, right? Like, we don't get to know that it's really cool that she's a matron, not just because she's doing it, but because she's denied that call to matronness in the past.
Right. Yeah.
And can I just say, she fills it so well in a party that desperately needs guidance. Like, some of the best moments, at least for me, I've had in the campaign, and there's been a lot of great moments, have been, I mean, I built a character that was basically putty in the hands of everybody else. Like, easily influenced, doesn't know what he's doing, and very susceptible to influence. And
yeah,
the fact
could you elevator pitch Uniwan real quick for people?
Oh dear, that's gotta be a whole other episode.
Elevator pitch. 2 minutes tops.
Elevator pitch 2 minutes tops. Okay, let's do it real lickety split style. Uniwan, think of a robot that has been consumed by growth and algae, something that may be like a parts car that you left in your backyard that the plants have begun to slowly reclaim it. But imagine if that parts car then got back up, woke back up, and began roaming the earth. He doesn't know what's happening. He doesn't know what's become of the world he used to be before he became that scrap heap sitting in the backyard. But he's just trying to learn and understand what has happened and maybe uncover a little bit about himself along the way. I think that's a very brief.
I think that's an incredible one. Yeah. And so I think that's something where, as he is being influenced by this party, right? Many of them are old war veterans and smug upper class, right? I think Vidala 100% found a space in Uniwan that she felt the responsibility to provide some sort of guidance in that setting, right? I think that leads to great character dynamic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I love it. There's so many really cool dynamics in this campaign. It's one of the things I love the most about this campaign is I feel like and this is not disparaging towards anyone or anything, but very often I feel like there's when there's so many people at a table, inevitably some connections kind of wind up being stronger than others or a little more natural than others. I feel like in the campaign we're currently playing, it feels like there's a really good connection to like everybody. Everyone has something to kind of pull on and play with between each other. At least I feel that way. And that's one of the things that makes this campaign really interesting, to throw a compliment that way.
I agree, and I think that's in no small part to not only the players making characters that are open to those relationships, but also a DM who knows how to subtly and gently guide character stories into conflict and relationship with one another, right?
Jared, that doesn't
100%.
mean kill more parents, but you're doing okay. Just as an aside.
And, well, so you had me thinking as we were talking, too, was that I think having characters that want to know and ask the questions about other characters. I enjoy having that sort of character, right? Is, okay, I want to ask the question about the other person when they say, I look at the strange watch in my pocket, glance around and put it away, right? And go about my day. Well, okay, the player wants to talk about that. So play a character who's going to ask that question, right? That's the only way you're going to find out more about the other people at the table, and that's how you have more fun.
Yeah, hell yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's move into a really quick question. I know we've been these are some thick, juicy, meaty questions.
Yeah.
Let's get some sprinkles on there. How'd you get the name?
That's a grand one. I could not come with a name, and I was in my kitchen and I was looking at the fruits and vegetables that I had there, and my eyes landed on a Vidalia onion.
It was an onion?
An onion, a Vidalia onion.
Hold on, I gotta Google this.
It's a yellow sweet onion.
Oh,
And I was
shit.
like, how do I make Vidalia vaguely more fantasy, but not have it obviously be a character named after an onion? And I was like, well, let me just get rid of the other I, and I have Vidala.
They have layers, TJ.
She has
They
got
have
layers.
layers. That's awesome. I swear half of my characters are just like, I'm going to hit random on the fantasy name generator enough times till something catches my eye. And then I just pick that name.
Oh, yeah.
So, hey, there is no wrong way to pick a name. Sometimes they just
gosh,
come to you,
man.
man.
No, I mean, I'm a big fan. I think character name generators are completely fine, and they're a great place to start. But I can never quite connect to the name unless I somehow come about it in my own world and life. And I like to start with pick an item or object or word that already has a slightly funky name and just start changing vowels around and removing vowels or swap around the first consonant and see what happens. And sometimes you stumble into dramatic names.
Yeah. I'm nowhere near that interesting. My names are almost always some level of... I honestly think my best name, like, choice, like, the one that has, like, never had any, like, kind of crunchy moments, if that makes sense. Like, there's never been a moment that I've been like, oh, that name didn't quite make sense, but it's just their name now, is actually Lonved. I loved Lonved's name. Like, it so instantly captured that character, and that's a whole other character to talk about, but I loved Lonved's name. And because it captured this sort of elegant, pompous nature, because who the fuck has a hyphen name like that if you're not somebody?
You're someone at that point.
Yeah, but at the same time, it also captured this really cool duality thing because it's not one name, it's a split name, and it's fake, and he's a shapeshifter, and all this shit. It's my favorite name. In contrast, Uniwan was literally just a joke because it was Unit 1.
Oh my god.
Did you not know that?
No, but it makes sense now. Okay, I have been in that exact same position. I made a vaguely robot character in a vaguely sci-fi D&D setting one time, and I gave him this weird string of letters and numbers that I wanted players to naturally find out spelt Leroy. But they just kept saying, like, E03. I was like, well,
That's not his name.
Yep. So,
I'm not kidding.
Sometimes it works.
They discovered the Uniwan joke session 1.
Oh my goodness.
Like, literally, he sat down at a table, and he was, like, really robot at the time. I remember that was at the time I was doing a, like, I think I was doing a, hello, how are you? Like,
Oh
I was
my
just
goodness.
figuring out the voice still.
Stephen Hawking pulls up to D&D.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember I just sat down and they were like, "What are you?" And it was like, "Oh, I am one unit of a fully autonomous war machine." And they were like, "Uniwan or Unit 1?" Yes. and that was just the joke. And so they caught it immediately. And for Adia Manson, I love Adia. I love that part of the name, but the Manson half of it is just like, in context of the world that Fen is doing, it's such like a bland name for the sort of like Middle Eastern inspiration world he made. It's like there's this Marikir and Sitek, and then there's the Mansons.
Right,
just
yeah.
the Mansons down south.
It's like reading a fantasy book and there's just like a Stephen,
Yeah, exactly. Right?
Jack. And you're like, "Oh, hi. Okay."
There's Vidala and Gilgamesh, and then Edward. Yeah, so naming is always fun, and you look back and you go, "Oh, that could have been a little better." But you know what? At the end of the day, like, it's like naming a dog, right? Like, it's awkward at first, but then like after like the first or second year, that's just their name. Like, you couldn't imagine them as some other name. So it all works out in the end. Couple more character questions before we move into a little bit more of a broader campaign questions. I find, when I play, and I'm obviously repeating myself because I find this I'm obviously repeating myself because I love asking this question, but I kind of want to set it up a little bit. When I play a character, I like to have like a flow chart for that character so that, D&D is basically the ultimate stress test of a character, because it will obviously, something inevitably will like be like a wrench in the machine. Like some event will happen you weren't expecting, right? That you have to then, as that character, react to spontaneously. And so I like to have a flow chart so I can be like, okay, if this happens, do this, unless this, and then this, and that usually kind of dictates most of what a character's actions will be on a campaign. But very often there will be moments where you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even consider that action. You have to create like an entirely new branch in the flowchart to accommodate that. And that kind of learning about a character that was just naturally, that you didn't consider at all when you first made the character, is one of the most exciting things that I've done in D&D. Like, for example, Adia, when she first came onto the scene, she was a complete vagabond. She's wearing like rags, and she's just this cocky, arrogant character. And then the first time they got to a city, and the first time they got clothes, and the first time they got money in their pockets, Fen was like, what are you going to do? What is your downtime spent doing? And it was like, Adia has money now. What does she want to do? Does she want to buy better clothes, or does she not? She goes, I'm like, wait a minute. She was an ex-noble. She wants to get the best things that this place can buy. She wants to spend this money. She wants to buy dresses. She wants to wear dresses. She wants like the highest echelon, like gossamer silk that she can get. And that was something I hadn't considered for the character at all. But it became such a perfect, like, oh my god, I can't believe I didn't think of that moment. Like, it fits her so perfectly. That it not only became a very integral part of her character in a way of expressing, like, her arrogance and self-assuredness, but it also kind of trickled down into, like, now she forces everyone to have good clothes, which is a really fun thing. So, like, I learned something through naturally playing Adia that I hadn't considered at all. It wasn't even in the realm of possibilities to me, but became a perfect thing to learn about her, and a perfect, like something that fit with her like so perfectly, like just like the perfect puzzle piece. Would you say that you've had any moments like that with Vidala? Like, have you learned anything about this character you didn't know before playing her?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I'll break this down into two steps. One, you were talking about sort of that flow chart. I agree, right? Yeah, I definitely try to. But again, we improvise, right? I usually like to break down a character and just give them 3 core attributes or things that they care about, right? So for Vidala, she's a merchant, right? So what are things she cares about? She cares about her own life. She cares about profit. But then I also made sure, right, that she's like a good-hearted, kind person, right? Well, how do you make those 3 things come together, right? Looking out for yourself, but looking out for others, and still making a buck. So she views problems in a monetary fashion. I'm sure you've seen that for her as she's worked her way through the world, right? She's like, well, what are we getting out of this, right? We've got to a king, or a queen, rather, and the queen has a problem. And her concern wasn't, yeah, we're going to save everyone. It's, what are we going to get out of risking our lives for this person, right?
Yeah.
But something that I hadn't expected to be in that flow chart was her suspicion of gods and her deep, fearful reverence for them in this setting. I had in her character description that around her neck, she just has a bunch of symbols of different gods. And I was like, that'll just be there. I can pull on that at some point, right? I was thinking of Benny from The Mummy at the time.
I literally was going to say, if I got a second, I was going to be like, that's Benny, right?
It's
that
Benny,
has to be Benny.
Yeah. Just with a little less backstabbing and spring cleaning.
That we know of.
When I came to the party and I was listening to the conversations, I realized that the party had almost a blatant disregard for the deities in the setting in some fashion. The wizard didn't really care. Fuck the gods. I can do what I want. I'm a wizard, right? They don't apply to me. Some other characters sort of disenfranchised by it. And I was realizing that a woman who is 98 years old has spent her life on the road, but is not a magic user in and of herself, is probably 2 things. She's probably very, very cautious about magic, because if you're in a magical world, there's a lot of dangerous shit that comes from magic. And the gods are probably something worth being revered, right? Now, she's a 98-year-old woman who's become a bit disenfranchised by things. So she more has a relationship of, if I don't mess with you and step on your toes, oh great gods, you don't mess around and step on my toes, right? So I found that she became that voice to sort of play against the party when they were talking on subjects of religion in the setting, right? Of, well, have you considered that you're fucking around with powers greater than yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really a perfect... I mean, yeah, that... mwah! That's good stuff right there. Interesting. It's also created another... a narrative thing to kind of lean on, another dynamic to I think you used a word like to pull on, right? To kind of pull on those little threads every once in a while.
Right, and I think
that's our DM brains like constantly trying like we're just gonna put those checkoff gems everywhere. We're not gonna sure which one we're gonna grab, but we're gonna grab one eventually.
I also think that playing D&D with your friends at the table is more interesting when you can get into disagreements and arguments or have differing opinions as these fantasy characters, right? And I don't think everybody agreeing, yeah, we're all the same opinion in mind, is as interesting of a story.
Yeah, 100% agree. Okay, next couple questions. We're going to try and do a couple lightning rounds, so
let's go for it.
Just see if we can knock some of these out really, really fast. And I know these may not be fast questions, but we're going to try.
I'll try.
Okay, first one. Favorite NPC?
Random shopkeep guy that I haggled with Abby's character.
Was that the creepy one?
No, he's the one who was selling horses. And we got really shitty horses.
Oh, so and JoJo got the one that that she loved. It was just like, we have to keep him. And we're like, oh my fucking god. Is that that one?
I think so, yeah.
Or was it a mule? I don't know. It's some truly tragic thing.
Some worthless animal.
Okay. Favorite campaign moment thus far?
Hard one. I think at the moment, it's one that didn't even affect my character, but it's when everybody was traveling through these creepy woods, and almost everybody in the party tripped balls and had these prophetic visions of their past and their futures and were almost led away. And Vidala didn't give a damn and just kept marching through those woods.
Yep. Straight as an arrow, stone cold.
Your magic don't affect me.
I think there's literally a moment where you in character were like, what the fuck is wrong with them? I vividly remember that being a thing.
What happened was I had to roll behind the screen, and I nat 20 to my save, and I'm like, she just doesn't even believe these people right now.
They're faking it.
Yeah. All right, hit me.
Okay. If you had to summarize the campaign thus far in one sentence, what would it be? Bonus points if you do it in 4 words or less.
Plants? More plants? Oh, fuck, plants.
Plants.
Plants. It's just plants. There's plants everywhere.
Okay.
I did feel like, though, now that we're sort of at I think the climax of our current arc, we've basically entered like a Dark Souls
kind of
plant
a
dungeon is what it feels like, and I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too, coming up tomorrow. Very excited for that. Okay, we're going to do something new thus far. We'll have some questions afterwards to wrap up with. That'll be a little bit more towards just you as a personal, as a player of D&D. But for now, to wrap up the character section, we're going to do something fun. We're going to do something I am currently calling Character Telephone. TJ, I'm going to have to put you on hold for a second as I call a very important guest.
Wait, what? No, I still got...
What God's forsaken device is this?
Hello. How are you? Who am I speaking to?
Who am I speaking to? Name yourself, spirit.
Oh, I'm just Miguel Bloomberg for the Just an Excuse podcast. How how are you doing today?
I am well enough. Are
Would you
you
mind-
trapped in this?
No, I'm fine. Would you mind answering some questions for me?
What are your questions?
Oh, nothing too exciting. Just a couple fun little tidbits. You know, I've been watching your story with great interest. I have more questions for you.
If I answer them, do you break out like a genie?
Oh no, I'll stay right here.
Oh. Very well. Ask.
So, the Toon Lock. Where did you meet this fucking thing?
The Toonlock, it stands for companion, my tongue. It is actually Garaz Shani. It is one of our beasts of burden in the deserts of Tavok. Very common. Hardy. Go for weeks without food.
Okay, interesting. If you don't mind me asking a rather personal question, what is your favorite place on the continent right now? Big place. I hear you've traveled a lot. What's your favorite destination been thus far?
But given that every land that I have ventured forth into is wallowing in some form of sin and punishment from the gods, I'd say my own home, amongst my own fellow trawlers, and a good caravan.
Little homesick?
Just a wee bit.
Just a wee bit. Okay. You travel with some colorful companions, Vidala. What would you say is something that really gets on your nerves about them?
Oh, I don't know, only their willingness to dive headfirst into danger-fraught situations with not the slightest regard to their own personal safety or what they're going to gain out of it. Oh, sure, we'll help you. Oh, I'll bend over backwards to save your city and go about with nothing but a pat on the back.
You know, no good deed goes unpunished, as they say. If you, on the topic of your colorful companions, which one do you think you could take in a fight? Which one could you absolutely kick the ass of?
That is a dangerous question.
It's a fun question.
To be completely honest with you, I would rather not fight any of them. I am an old woman, after all. But if I had to, I think I would most enjoy Asta.
So you heard it here, folks. Vidala thinks she could beat Aster's ass. Got it. Okay. Writing that down for the reporters.
He's just a boy. He hasn't even held a blade.
Okay. If you had to answer, which of the party do you think is most likely to get you killed?
That is also a good question. It would probably be the walking pile of rocks or Asta.
You don't think Shams get you into a little bit of trouble?
Shayam knows how to pick a fight. I can trust Shayam's judgment on that matter.
Okay. Well, you've answered some very interesting questions, thank you. I've only got one more to ask you. And this may be a bit personal, so, you know, if you don't want to answer it, feel free to hang up the phone. Vidala, my dear, if you were running from a monster and you had to sacrifice one of your party members, who would it be? Who do you trip in the wake of the charging bear?
This is a cruel question.
Fun questions.
The greater answer would be that you all die fighting such a thing. To sacrifice one member is pointless. I don't think I could do that.
You don't think you
So
could?
I suppose it would be myself. Besides, they're far younger than I. They have much more promise in their futures. They're the ones who will change the world. I'm just a traveling merchant.
Well, Vidala, I think you sell yourself short. You won't remember this conversation, but I had a lovely time talking to you. Goodbye.
What?
Good times.
I thought it was thrilling, just sitting here in silence, disconnected on hold.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, TJ. I didn't mean to put you on hold. Anyway, last few questions to round us out for the evening. I mean, they're a little bit more towards you as a player. I know we've honestly talked a lot about our personal opinions about D&D and playing, so we're going to really lean into that a bit here. Just as a kind of a appetizer to this conversation, what is your set the stage for us? What is your experience with D&D and TTRPGs?
Yeah, well, I've been playing D&D for, I suppose 6 years now, and then I've been DMing for probably about 4 of those years. My experience sprawls across several systems, though. I am always trying new game systems. D&D, I'm currently at a bit of a coming back to this moment, especially with their new release. But
so you kind of fell off of D&D for a little bit.
I did fall off of D&D. I am a big fan of some Free Leagues systems. So if I could shout out the Tales from the Flood or Forbidden Lands, those are 2 very good systems. Also a big fan of some of the what's the system called? The Wild Sea. Ooh, that's an incredible game system as well.
I've heard of none of these. I will have to look them up. Okay. What would you say? And again, I'm not gonna. These are obviously questions towards you as a person and as a player. I'm not asking you to self-report here. If you've not really got an answer for me, feel free to pass it along. What would you say as a player is your biggest pet peeve? Like, I know me personally, mine is that I have like 0 patience at all. Like, eventually I like playing the button pushers of characters.
Oh, yeah.
Because eventually, eventually I'm the guy that's just like, you know what? I'm pushing the button. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least we're doing something. Like, I feel like I have a very relentless internal clock ticking with like session time, where if we're role playing, and I'm happy to grind the session to a halt to have that moment between characters. But if we're planning to like a heist or something, and we start discussing it in character, and it kind of just devolves into like 7 people at a table discussing how to do something, and analysis paralysis sets in, then I have a very strong sense of like, we are here for 5 hours, and we burned an hour and a half just discussing how to get this guy's pocket money. So like, we gotta go. I'm just gonna grab the guy at this point. That's me kind of self-reporting myself. What would you say, if not that? What would you say is one of your rather bigger pet peeves?
I love those players. I think they're the best players because you're right. They do get things going. I think it just requires a player who knows when, we've spent too long on a situation, right? We have too much aimless, sophomoric philosophizing between 2 characters, which I'm plenty guilty of, and is a ton of fun.
Sorry. That's me.
But,
he's talking about
sometimes
me.
You get there, right?
I'm philosophizing.
I think in some ways that's a great secondary name for this show too, just aimless sophomoric philosophizing. I don't get too mad about stuff, right? But I agree. Sometimes the plot's gotta roll along. Now, if it's an in-person game though, I can't do food at the table.
Can't do food at the table.
I will throw a brick at someone. If someone's trying to tell me their plans or role play to me, and they got Doritos falling out their mouth, that's an immediate failed death save right there.
Okay. Oh, is this a DM? Is this the DM talking?
This is a DM. No, if I'm a player, that's PvP instantly.
Yeah, well, I am a chronic muncher. Like, I'll never roleplay with food in my mouth, but like whenever I'm not like in the scene, to put it that way, I feel like I constantly got to be munching on something. I think I'm coming to a point where I have a ritual that whenever I sit down to play D&D, I need to like have a thing of food to like consume and be full by the time like we're into session proper.
That's a good point.
Like I always have like either like a bowl of soup or like chicken or something, and then by the time session starts, because you sit down.
Soup's the worst. Soup's the worst. You go, and her father is actually the Baron. Oh God! I'm all out of it. Verisimilitude? I don't even know it.
Oh yeah, I love soup. Soup is delicious, but definitely not helpful to roleplay. But yeah, I mean, for most of the time you want, I feel like I definitely, like you said, don't want to be eating like mid action. But like usually when you sit down at like where session starts at 7, session doesn't start at 7. Session more like starts at like 7:15 because we're all gonna sit down, we're gonna talk for a minute, and I can finish my meal in 15 minutes, no sweat.
There you go.
So I don't know. I like feeling full at a table because the second I get hungry, I'm distracted. I gotta start munching on something. Mm-hmm. That's just me. That's my personal defects. Speaking of personal defects, strengths and weaknesses as a player, would you say? What do you lean into? What do you find yourself leaning away from? Like me personally, roleplay junkie, want to roleplay all the time, but still kind of time sensitive of that as well. My weaknesses, I would definitely say, along the side of like having very little patience. I'm not a good. I would say without cowardice, I'm not a good combat player. Like I don't. I'm not very good at it. Like most of the characters I have played, they have been characters where like the narrative side of them is really interesting, but like mechanically they're very simple. Like my first character ever was a monk. Punch something, maybe use a key point. And my second character, and I think probably my favorite class to this day, is a paladin. And the flowchart on that combat is very simple. Did I hit? Yes. Did I hit? No. Did I hit? Yes. Smite. Turn over. Right? Maybe a lay on hands in there somewhere if you're really spicing it up. But Warlock and Caster classes are definitely examples where I've tried to and branch out into the more mechanical heavy characters. Yeah. So I don't feel like personally I'm very good at them, but I also feel like they're just not something that comes to me because I can entertain myself just fine with the narrative of like I swing my sword and I miss. Okay, how does my character react to missing that strike? Like it's not just because as a good DM hopefully does, it's not just you miss. It's, this time the enemy deflected the blow, and what's that like? Like, what does the combat feel like? So I'm very easily enthralled by the roleplay side, and mechanically it's just dice rolls to me. Even though, like, those dice rolls inform the narrative. It's a narrative avenue rather than, like, a thing I engage in too deeply, personally.
Yeah.
What would you say strengths and weaknesses?
I think in some ways I'm a mirror of you in some fashion, where I know this system. I think it was probably about 6 months ago that I realized somehow I had basically the entire system of D&D and entire spells just like slotted and memorized in my head. Wow. I knew what all the weapons did, and combat to me in some ways can get really dull and boring because I've ratted out this system. I mean, I've played Baldur's Gate games I love, the Banner Saga games, if you've ever played those. These sort of crunchy tactical games I'm all about. So I would say combat is something that I'm not afraid of by any means. But when it comes to story and role-playing, again, I'd say I'm a decent role-player, right?
Absolutely.
What I can't do, I struggle so much with having the main plot threads suddenly be about my character. I struggle there so much. I don't like having the spotlight in D&D. I'd rather play the person who's one of those side characters to the main guy who's got the spotlight on them. I feel so awkward and uncomfortable in that situation every single time.
If you don't mind me asking why, because I'll go ahead and preface that I feel incredibly similar about that, but I'm curious as to your reason, and then I will divulge mine.
Right, yeah. Well, I think it comes into two fashions, right? One, I feel like I'm taking away time from the other players and that they have other cool backstories and they should get to experience their backstories, and we're spending time on mine. And what if I don't do a cool enough job in my moment, right? What if I'm not neat enough to keep everyone else entertained while we're doing my thing?
Yeah, I mean, shit. Like, 2 for 2, dude. I feel one of my biggest problems, biggest insecurities when it came to playing Dungeons and Dragons or just role playing in general is that, like, I'm ex theater, recovered, thankfully, 20 years sober. But this was a big, like, this is like my acting fix. This scratches that itch for me, and the urge to really just get down and deep and dirty into playing a character and getting into their mindset. I love that so much, but so often I feel like I'm overreaching, like I'm hogging the limelight sometimes. I'm always like, oh, this would be a really funny thing to say in that moment, but I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to suddenly turn the spotlight onto me and steal that moment away from somebody else who might have had a really cool moment. I mean, like, I know when you can probably attest to this, when we were playing Curse of Strahd, I DM'd you multiple times. Like, hey, like, if I'm overdoing it here, like, please say something. Like, I will pull back. But it's just like, I find myself naturally drawn to that, but I get that same kind of like, ooh, I'm maybe taking a little too much. Because we've all heard the horror stories, right, of the main characters, right? I feel like that affects so much of the way we see the game. My only justification for that has helped me sleep at night is that if I am going to be in a scene and I'm going to get into it, I'm at least going to take somebody with me. Like, I'm going to be like, okay, one of you is coming with me in this scene. I don't care if you're just standing in the corner while I talk to my long-lost brother. You're going to be in the scene here, right? Like, just, I want to engage with them. And Uniwan's been a great excuse for that, because it's not just me role-playing. It's like I'm talking to somebody. I'm not just by myself, right?
You heard it here, folks. If you get the Fade the Black scene, bring a friend.
But yeah, I feel the same way, man. I really do. It's just like, we want to have fun, but it's also like I don't want to steal the shit. It's a team game. We're all supposed to have 100%. Fun here.
And I think being aware of that makes us all better players, right? Because we don't want to steal the limelight, and we are caring about the other people at the table. I think ultimately it is a good curse to have, even if it makes us feel awkward in those moments where we have to perform in some small fashion.
Yeah, true. All right, last question to wrap this up. And it's a bit of the soporific variety, so, feel free to wax lyrical here. Why do you love Dungeons and Dragons, role-play games in general? What makes this what's so amazing about this hobby for you? How would you summarize what makes this so cool?
I think it comes down to two things. I think I love the catharsis that D&D provides us. The ability to solve problems in a night is just so great when you have to live day to day, solving problems that can't be solved in a single day. And secondly, I think it just makes us better problem solvers and better arguers and that sort of thing. Getting to argue and talk to people. I am a much more confident social speaker now than I was when I hadn't played D&D. I think it's made me more adept. So yeah, that's why I like D&D.
Well, okay. I think that's a good way to put it. And a perfect place to, I think, wrap up the show here tonight. I'm currently running just under 1 hour and 15 minutes, so we definitely took our time with this one. TJ, I just want to obviously say thank you so much again for coming on to talk about your character and talk about Dungeons and Dragons in general. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I just want to say thank you for taking this risk. I know this is only the 3rd episode, and you perpetuate a very fun hobby for me, and I want to say thank you.
Why, thank you, sir.
Okay. If there's anything else you'd like to say before I sign us out, this is your moment to do it. Oh, my mom's gonna
Please
love
don't.
Oh boy, I'll put a censor beep over it. I don't know.
Oh, wonderful. It's just at the end. What else would you like to say?
Beep beep. All right, I hope I remember to do that. Well, in either case, thank you, TJ, so much for coming on, and obviously I want to thank you, the viewer, for stopping by, and it's been a lovely time. It's been a lovely afternoon here today. I want to say thank you for coming, and hope you have a wonderful next session. Woo!